Bienvenido a Desde Cero. Welcome to Right from the Start. Today's guest is Dr. Chris Gonzales. Dr. Chris Gonzales, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It's first time. Never done one of these.
Never done a podcast before?
No, sir. No.
Well, the reason you're on here is because Roy Lopez, he brought you up and said, hey, I know a veterinarian. You're a veterinarian. DMV is what you call yourself, right?
Yeah, DVM.
And DVM, Doctor of Veterinary Medicine,
Yes,
right?
sir. Yep.
And we want to get you in here and tell us about your story and how you got to where you're at, and hear probably an inspiring story from you. Okay.
Sure.
So first of all, we want to get to know you a little bit and ask you where you're from and where were you born.
Yeah, born in Terre Haute, Indiana. So I tell a lot of people it's if you go to Indianapolis and go west, almost to Illinois, that's about where I grew up at. Because no one knows the town. It's a little bit too small to really see on a map or know very much about it. But that's where I'm from. That's where I grew up, and yeah.
And your parents?
Mom grew up in Indiana, in Terre Haute. She is a small business owner. And took over a portion of a family-owned business for the past 50 or 60 years in Terre Haute. They manufacture labels, and then Dad was born in Corpus and lived there for the first 11 or 12 years of his life, and then moved up to Indiana with his grandmother, who primarily raised him for the most part. That's where they met, and that's where I spent the first, up until I left for Purdue or college.
Right.
That's where I lived.
So what was the reason for your dad moving to Indiana?
I don't know the whole backstory behind that. Honestly, I think that Dad's upbringing was not a glamour story by any means. I don't think. He grew up with 8 or 9 step brothers and sisters in a double wide, and he really brought himself from nothing, and they had to collect cans off the side of the road to eat. That was where my dad came from. So I think a lot of that was getting away from that environment. I think, and I think that I don't think it took him a while to realize. I think that yes, it's we'll call it painful and uncomfortable to leave your family and everything you've ever known, but I think that sometimes people getting away from that environment is what they know that they have to do. Right. So I think that was a driver of that, and I think it's probably why he stayed in Indiana for so long. And they've held a decent relationship. They definitely visit family in Corpus a lot more often now than they used to. Mm-hmm. I don't know why exactly, but it's definitely a relationship that has been maintained, and I don't think there's any bad blood or anything like that. But that's just the reason why he went up there and just stayed for the most part.
Yeah, tell me about your childhood. How was your childhood growing up in Indiana?
Yeah, no, it was. I played. I see a lot of sports memorabilia in here. I played baseball for 15 years growing up, and that was it. I started at 3 or 4 years old, and my last game was in high school, and played year round for the most part.
Right, you did all the travel ball and all that, right?
Oh yeah, yep. It was year round, 100% baseball all the time, and I really enjoyed it. It was something where it came down to sports and versus education or work or whatever the case may be, and you have to look at that and you go, Mariano Rivera was my idol growing up. Loved watching him pitch, and I pitched during the last, let's say the last 4 or 5 years of my career primarily. Mm-hmm. You have to look at yourself and go, am I him or am I going to have to be something else? Right. And I think that reality has to set in at some point. So I decided more of the education route, just because quite frankly, there's just no way that I'm good enough to play at that next level. So that's primarily why I took that route. And really, sports was a huge part of my upbringing, definitely. And I think
what do you think sports or baseball taught you?
No, so many things. Discipline, work, hardship, struggle. I mean, I think sports are absolutely a crucial piece of from a lot of different factors when you're young and growing up and trying to learn, and the relationships you build. I still would say I have a great relationship with a lot of the guys I played baseball from the age of 5. So it's something that you can take along with you for the rest of your life. But I think a lot of the life lessons that are learned are absolutely essential, and I've had that conversation with people. I don't know how my mind would function or how my thoughts for different things would be lacking if I didn't have sports in my life growing up. So
Right.
it's
When do you make that decision of saying, "Hey, I'm gonna drop all the sports and focus on education"? Was it your senior year or freshman or sophomore?
I kind of knew. You kind of see the writing on the wall
Right.
whenever,
Because everybody has that dream, right? Everybody has that dream of,
Always.
"Hey, I'm gonna go pro." You
Yeah.
know? But
Yeah.
when did you decide?
Yeah.
Or
Prob-
when did you know?
Probably freshman, sophomore year. I was I feel like I was quite competitive until everybody else grew, and they grew, that's just a lack of size and strength really is what it kind of boiled down to. But and then you start to see where everybody kind of lines out at once you hit the high school age, and that I just didn't have the athleticism, the strength, the speed, all of those things to go to that next level. So it was obvious pretty early. But that was primarily it, and I always I knew how to work hard. That's about it. I wasn't ever smart, I wouldn't say, but I knew how to work at it, and I knew how to. I knew my strengths and my weaknesses pretty quick. So yeah, I would say pretty early on in high school is when you can kind of really you can tell if someone has that ability to go to the next level or not.
Right. Do you say right away, "Hey, this is the career path that I want to take as far as becoming a veterinarian"? In high school, or was that during college?
That was probably freshman or sophomore year of high school.
Of high school.
Yeah.
So do you start taking courses that's going to help you out in the future?
So you're in high school, kind of the education path is your middle school is a wash. Elementary doesn't matter, right? The things that you can do during those times are your experiences. So if you work at a veterinary clinic, or you're at a horse barn, or you work on a dairy farm, whatever, you name it, that you're involved in the veterinary industry or the animal industry overall. Those are ways you can get involved very early. As far as an educational path, it's really starting in high school. You take all of your prerequisites or your sciences, your AP courses, and try to make yourself the most attractive candidate to an animal science program or pre-veterinary program. Purdue is the one that I went to out of college, or out of high school into college. But you're setting yourself up. And if anyone out there is listening that is interested in doing it, whether it's a profession of any kind, I think that requires higher education, doctors, lawyers, veterinarians, the list kind of goes on. It starts day one of your freshman year. Clock starts. There's no more, because if you get too behind too quick, you can't dig yourself out. And if you are going to dig yourself out, you're going to do it the hard way and the long way, like I did. So if I could give a piece of advice to anybody out there that has, it's day one, high school. That's when it starts. Do everything you can to maintain a good grade point average. Be involved in clubs. That's what these colleges look for. They're looking for well-roundedness. It's not just a 4.0 and that doesn't really get you too far anymore.
Right. What kind of things did you get involved in high school? That helped you in the future?
Yeah, National Honor Society was something that I did. Sports, obviously, that is a whole other set of lessons, but that's I think important. I worked a little bit at some small animal veterinary clinics in high school. Worked at a horse barn in the evenings during the summer, just for lack of a better term, shoveling poop, being around horses. I worked at shadowed for a little bit of time at a mixed animal clinic, just a little bit north of me. Okay. So kind of a wide range of different things, Humane Society or the Humane Shelters. You could volunteer your time over there. So a mix of kind of a little bit of everything.
Right. So knowing early in your high school days that you wanted to be a veterinarian or at least go in that path, that these things helped you, right? The earlier you knew, the better it was for you.
Yeah,
right?
it gives you more. I think if it gives you more time to experience different things, and I think that's again, it's yes, grades are important, but they're also looking at you from a perspective of your experiences and
Right.
what you're going to bring as because you are a member, you carry that university whatever forward. That's and they're looking for okay, who's the ideal candidate and what do we want to represent the school? And that's what they're looking for really. So you kind of have to remove yourself from just the grades part and say, okay, what do they want now? Like what is going to take me and make me the most attractive candidate to them?
Right. What did you do during high school to find a college or counselor or what did you or and your parents do to kind of get you in that path of going to the right college?
My so we'll start with the parents side of things. Like, I'm first generation, just like we discussed before
Right.
we started. First generation to go to a 4-year program, and my parents really they didn't know a whole lot. I don't think about the education pathway. It was kind of up to me, and that's not a knock against them. They just were ignorant to it. Right? There's no. Sometimes you have to just figure it out for yourself, but it's down that path was I had to start basically using the internet as a resource and saying, okay, what are these schools? What's the minimum GPA? How many hours do they need? What testing do they require? Because there is, or what tests are they looking at just to get into a 4-year program like undergrad? The SAT, the GRE, those types of things. What is required by them is a huge thing that we need to pay attention to. And then as far as my parents, they were always supportive. Always, it didn't matter. It didn't matter what I was doing, but they were supportive to an extent, and their knowledge was to an extent, and it was up to kind of me to kind of go and try to figure that out. Counselors, that's an interesting one. That's one where you can listen to what they say. Certainly, and you may not like what they say. I didn't like what they had to say because my grades were not good enough to do the things that they thought that I needed to be doing to go to Purdue and do whatever else. But yeah, sure, certainly lean on them. Absolutely ask them, hey, and ask them to be honest with you and say, what do I need to do? And is this even realistically possible for me to do this at this point, based upon what you're a freshman, sophomore, junior, whatever the case, senior year, it's too late at that point. You need to, not too late, but you have to really get a jump on these things from a grades perspective in order to make yourself, again, an attractive candidate for college. So yeah, it's really kind of leveraging a whole bunch of different resources and talking to people, talk to veterinarians or people in the industry that you shadow and say, hey, what did you do? What was your experience? What did you not like? What did you like? That's another big piece of it too.
Right. So, do you start applying for all these colleges and hope that you get into one, or did you apply for certain colleges that you really wanted to go to?
Yeah,
as far as Purdue and all these colleges.
I stayed primarily in Indiana. I had we'll say barely above average GPA. I didn't have I didn't have amazing grades ever at any point until veterinary school. Honestly,
right. So your grades shouldn't discourage you from pursuing your dreams, right?
No,
I mean, certainly you were trying.
Oh yeah,
but you say you didn't have the best grades, but that didn't discourage you at all, right?
No, and I'll be very transparent. I mean, I think my GPA out of high school was a 3.1. I went to Purdue because that's a school that I got into, which I'm extremely thankful. That's been a huge part of my life for the most part. I've met incredible people there and still connected decently well to the university. But it's one of those things where then that's why I said very early on, you need to, once day one of freshman year starts, the clock starts right then. Because if not, you are going to dig yourself a hole that is going to be a fight to get out of. Right. And I did that. I took the long way around. It, cost me more time, more student loans, things like that.
Right.
But it is doable. It's just you have to. You're really
right. You're saying from your experience, if I would have done that day one, it would have been a lot easier, right?
No, easily,
but it still can be done.
It can be done, absolutely. You're going to figure out really quickly how bad you really want it because you're going to, it's a long steep climb out of that, but it's definitely doable.
So what was the college that you were admitted to?
Yeah, Purdue University is one that I got into.
That was the first one?
Yeah, and then another one was Indiana State, which was local to Terre Haute. That's one where, gosh, probably 85% of my graduating class ended up in Indiana State. The ones that went on to a 4-year school, and then I think there were a handful of us from my high school personally that ended up at Purdue.
So right after you graduated high school, did you immediately go to Purdue?
Yep, straight up.
That next semester, that next fall, you attended?
Yep.
How was your first semester as a college student?
Shocking from a lot of different ways. I grew up in we'll call it a relatively rural area. And then you get thrown into a melting pot of people from all over the world. There's 60,000 people on campus. You live in a dorm that's the size of this room, Right. It's a whole different way of life. So it's a shock to the system from that perspective. And then you don't understand it at the time, but the amount of responsibility that you have for being there and academically doing well is definitely something that is, I didn't realize personally. A lot of people may, if they had the, if they come from a long line of people that have gone higher education, they understand what happens at that level. But I didn't know that.
How far away from home are you?
About an hour and a half.
Hour and a half.
Yeah.
That's not too bad still.
Yeah. No, it was easy drive, and
right.
I went home pretty consistently. Like I said, I'm an outdoors person. Right. I don't like being kind of trapped in a concrete jungle, but that's kind of what it was, and it took me a while to figure it out. At Purdue, it definitely, I worked by far academically the hardest I've ever worked, right. And got the worst results from it. And it was inverse of that. As soon as I got into veterinary school, or even during my master's, it was complete inverse. I don't know whether that was the distractions of undergrad, and don't get me wrong, there's a social aspect to this as well. I out of the people that I was around, there was my social interaction with people was 5%, I would say, of the people that I was around. So that's another thing. I was in a fraternity at Purdue. Again, some lifelong friends, incredible experiences, incredible networking. You have to be careful, though, if you are not the type of person that can't separate yourself from it and do what, focus on what you need to do. That is a dangerous place to go.
Are you talking about the college life?
Yeah, pretty much.
Partying and,
right.
and all that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, but that, again, yes, you do it to some extent, right. But you also, I like I said, I worked harder at Purdue than I did at veterinary school, times 2 probably.
Right. Is it because it was your first semester there and you wanted to prove something to yourself?
I think a lot of it was I had to study in high school. I didn't have to study like that. I didn't have to, the teaching environment is totally different. The lecture halls, you're sitting there with 500 people. I had just not been exposed. I took some advanced classes in high school, but nothing to that rigor, I guess is a good way to put it. So it was really just like, no matter how many hours I put into this, it's just not converting.
And in college, nobody's chasing you down to do your work.
No,
right? You're responsible for your own work.
You are on your own. Yeah.
They're not calling your parents and say you didn't turn in your homework.
Right. Yeah. You're completely on your own. Yep.
So I'm interested in always the first semester, because that's always the shocking of all the semesters, pretty much. What type of courses do you take, and was it a full college? I guess the hours.
Yeah.
Full schedule. So
there's a couple of ways you can go. You can kind of go about it. So the way that I went about it was I wanted a bachelor's degree out of this 4 years. There are options, and people do 3 years without a degree, and they basically just call themselves pre-med or pre-veterinary medicine or whatever the case may be, and they take a select set of courses. And then they're rolling the dice and saying, I know that I'm going to do great academically. And my end goal is vet school, and I don't even care about anything else. I don't care about a bachelor's. I don't care about any of that. I was not obviously that confident myself. So I took the animal sciences route. So starting from your first year, you're taking the typical, 15 to 18 credit hours per semester. It's heavy in the sciences. Chemistry, organic chemistry, physics. I don't even know if they're involving calculus anymore. Very heavy in math anymore, but a lot of very, very heavy in the sciences for sure.
Was there a time or a point in your college days that you're like, I don't think I can finish this, or did anything get difficult?
Oh yeah. I mean, so full transparency again. What I graduated, my GPA from Purdue was 2.7. So again, you're looking at professional schools that are saying minimum 3.3, 3.5 to even be looked at. If not, they're like, sorry, it doesn't matter who you are, what your name is, what your experiences are. You're not even close. So yeah, there were several times, and especially again digging myself out of a hole when I started. It was rough. I mean, very, very rough. I think I had around a 2.0 when I started. So it's not for the lack of work, because I definitely worked extremely hard at it. It just was something that just didn't pan out. So yeah, sophomore year, that reality sets in of here's where I'm sitting, here's where I know I need to be before I start applying to veterinary schools my junior year and my senior year, and I'm a whole GPA point below what I even need to be at, and I have got 2 to 3 semesters to figure it out or turn it around or whatever the case may be. So then you're scrambling, and it's not a fun place to be in mentally, because it's you take this first generation college student, your entire family is behind you. You think that you're going to go off and do all these things, and then reality hits you, and then you realize, well, this may not work out. This may be a whole waste of time. And that's kind of what happened. So I went through my entire experience at Purdue, graduated 2.7. I went back to work, and it was even hard to find a job in the industry of animal science coming out of school. And not that I don't know that my searching was too in depth, or that's not really what I wanted. I wanted to be a veterinarian, so it wasn't really attractive to me. But it was a degree that I had, and you might as well use what you have at that point in time.
So you majored in what?
Animal sciences.
Animal science. And after that, you have to apply for veterinary school, right?
Yep.
Explain all that process to us.
It's probably changed a little bit since I went through it. So your sophomore to junior year, you're going to basically have taken a lot of your prerequisites. And what I mean by that is a lot of courses that we'll say 90% of veterinary schools or medical schools, because they're very synonymous most of the time, are going to require you to take, and they will look at those first. So your core GPA is what your core science GPA is what they're going to look at primarily, and then they're going to look at your GPA for your non-core courses. So that's how they're going to break that down a little bit. How you apply is, I think all but maybe 1 or 2 schools use a program called VMCAS. I don't know what that acronym stands for, but it is basically a platform where you go and you submit all of your grades, all of your experience. It's basically an electronic resume is basically what it is. And then you, from there, are submitting all these things, rec letters, recommendation letters, through this portal, and then you're just shooting them out to all the schools by the deadline. And then that's basically how you are applying. There are application fees to every single school that you apply to. So that's another thing. Cost starts to creep a little bit during your application process. And then you're waiting. You're waiting on a lot of schools. Like I said, in my personal situation, a lot of them were early denials, saying, "Look, your grades are not even close."
How many schools do you apply to?
Yeah, it depends. It really depends. My entire academic career was basically what can I work my way into, because I know that I'm not that competitive. So what can I do, right? So I applied, I think, to eight schools. First round, denied by everyone. I'd applied 3 cycles before I did a master's, but we can get to that later on. But it's you are applying to as many as you want, but like I said, application fees it's going to be a couple $1,000s for that many schools every time. And you can start as early as some people start their sophomore year, some people start their junior, some their senior year. It just kind of depends on where you are with your prerequisites and credits and experience and things like that. So it's pretty variable, but it really, like I said, you use that platform, and then you kind of just go from there as far as applying.
Okay. And you mentioned your master's. Tell me about did you have to get your master's before you were admitted to veterinary school?
I did, yeah. So
what was the reason for that?
The reason was because I was not nearly as competitive as I needed to be from an academic standpoint. So like I said, a lot of people nowadays, and I know people that had 3.9s, 4.0s, that 3.8s that were still being denied from veterinary schools. I know still to this day people that are doing that. So mine was not I didn't have another choice. That was it. That was my only road. So basically what had happened was I applied to all these schools. Lincoln Memorial was one of those. They declined me a seat in the veterinary school, but they sent me a application for the master's program, which is a master's of veterinary biomedical sciences is the technical term of it. And they said, hey, you're not competitive right now. You should apply to this one-year master's program that's non-thesis. I think that they have recently changed that to requiring you to do a thesis, which is research, and then you write a paper, submit a paper, publish a paper if you're lucky. But that is the road that I took. It was basically a phone call interview, and said, okay, well, you'll start next fall. So you have to look at this whole process. And I graduate from a 4-year program from a pretty prestigious, from a pretty good school.
Right, Purdue.
Right. And 4-year program, you got the degree, which everybody thinks is the end-all, be-all, all the time. And then you find yourself working in the back of a manufacturing plant for the next 6 to 7 months, going, this is what my expectation was, and here I am making $9 an hour or whatever it was at the time. So that's
with a degree.
With a degree, with a 4-year degree, right? So that's a spot where you're like, I hope this works. You're betting, all chips are on the table. You're betting on yourself, and you're saying, the master's, at least for me, was there's no other way. This is it. This is the only shot that you have to get where you want to go. So I didn't have another choice. That was it. So I got into the master's. How Lincoln Memorial has it set up when I went through it was your first semester that you are there, you're taking anatomy with the first year veterinary students. So you're taking an extremely rigorous course. Anatomy is probably the most rigorous course you'll take in a veterinary medicine curriculum. So they're testing you. They're saying, okay, you've got everything but the grades. If I give you a fresh start, will you be able to show me that you can do this? And that's what they're doing. They're putting you in the first year of veterinary anatomy. They're doing physiology, biochem, some pretty rigorous science courses, and basically giving you the chance to say, you messed up the last 4 years. Can you prove it to me right now in this setting with these teachers that you have, these professors? Can you do it now? Because most of the time, that's all these people are lacking. Everyone in my class, for the most part, they probably had a ton of experience. I had, a decent amount, I would say, and a diversity of experience, but my GPA just wasn't there. So that was primarily the bridge, saying, can you do this or can you not do this? So that was that for me. But how they have it structured whenever I went through was, if you got greater than a 3.0 in your fall semester, you were guaranteed an interview for the next fall's class. So at that point, again, back is against the wall. There's no other option. So you head down, focus, work. Did well enough for an interview, and I think that that's a big hurdle for people that are not as competitive from a paper standpoint are typically the ones that are a little bit more competitive face to face. And what I mean by that is, these veterinary schools, I think nowadays, are looking more for the well-roundedness versus the genius. And that's going to sound a little backwards, but from my 2 cents, my perspective is that, yes, you have to have the grades, but this is a people business. 100%. That dog can't talk. That cat can't talk. That horse can't talk. It's 100%. You better be able to talk to somebody. And I think that they have come to that realization, thankfully, because there's a lot of people that have been kept out of the profession. I think wrongfully, maybe not the correct word, but people that could have been great doctors that just didn't have the academic side of it to back it up, and which is important. You have to. You're a doctor. The people who are paying you for your advice. You better at least if you don't have the advice, with the correct advice, you better be able to figure out how to get that right. So I can understand all kind of angles of it, but it's but yeah, my situation was very much this is what I have to do, and I'm out of options.
Well, at this point, I think you're like 5 or 6 years in, right? What kept you motivated?
Oh, a lot of things. One, I didn't want to let myself down. That's number one. Number two, I had plenty of people tell me that you're wasting your time, you can't do it, and I love, you want me to do something and do it very well, just tell me I can't do it, and then I'll probably just do it just to prove you wrong. And that's, whether that's wrong or right, that's just kind of the mentality that I play by. I had a lot of people behind me with support from my entire family, so that was, I wanted to make them proud. I wanted to be that. I didn't want to just do the 4 years and be like, oh yeah, well he did that, but that's kind of where he stopped. I wanted to be that person out of my family that was like, he did it and then he went on to do everything else on top of that. So just trying to be that example of here's what you can be. It's probably going to be a fight to get there, but you can do that. So there's a lot of different motivating factors there, but those are probably the big three.
Right. How long did it take you to get your master's?
Just a year. Yeah, it was a 1-year master's program.
Right. And then after that, did you reapply for veterinary school?
So I went straight in after that. So I did really well my fall semester, did really well for the entire year of my master's. Got accepted into Lincoln Memorial, and then started the following fall at Lincoln Memorial for veterinary school. Yeah.
Okay. And tell us how veterinary school was.
Oh man, there's a lot of, I think it's rigorous. My significant other is at A&M right now for veterinary school as well. So it is, you go from this mentality of all I have to do is get there. If I can just get there, I'll be all right. And then you get there, and then you go, wow, this is really hard. And then, do I really want this? Is this what I wanted? Is this what I expected? You start to play that through your head, like, this is extremely challenging. Right. This is probably the most rigorous thing that I will do mentally probably in my life.
What was difficult about veterinary school?
It's constant. It's like the best analogy I've heard about it is like drinking out of a fire hose for 4 straight years. It's just like it's the material compared to undergrad is not. It's not aerospace engineering. It's not complicated things, really. If you have a basic understanding of sciences, it's the pace of school is the big problem. So you, instead of having, just 1 or 2 challenging classes, now you have 4 or 5 challenging classes, all of which are going to make you a better veterinarian in the future. So they're important. But it's really is the pace and the rigor that I think wears a lot of people out. So for me, I expected it to be hard, but again, I kind of had the mentality of whenever I got denied so many times, it was just like I don't really care at this point. It's going to be what it's going to be. There were a lot of phone calls home saying this is ridiculous. I am miserable. It's hard. It's constant, but it's doable, and I'm doing well. I think that's kind of you have to train your mind, I think, to just be prepared, because it is hard. It doesn't matter where you go to school, the number 1 ranked school in the country or the number 28th or 29th or 30th or wherever we are, it's going to be hard everywhere, no matter what.
You still got to be a veterinarian.
Yeah.
And they all got to teach,
right.
teach the same thing, right?
Exactly.
So what were some of the courses that you took? What is the courses that a veterinary student takes?
Yeah, so there's a lot of them. So during your first year, they described it as everything that is normal. So your normal anatomy, physiology, things like that. Those are your kind of baseline courses. Year 2 in most curriculums are everything that is abnormal. So then you start to get into pathology, disease, all kinds of things that where all the normal bodily functions and everything that was normal last year that you just learned, now that we're going to flip them on their head with diseases, and trying to figure out what they look like, how to use diagnostics to find them, and that's kind of where that goes. Year 3 is a lot of anesthesia, surgery, medicine courses. That was probably my favorite year, just because you can start to really get a global perspective, I think, and start to use, yes, you have your science-based courses that were really probably dry to learn and boring, but it all comes around kind of full circle and kind of helps you understand it from not only, yes, this is on a day-to-day basis, and I don't really care about the minutia of, the biology or the, the physiology, but now I understand why we do it this way. So that's third year. And then fourth year, it depends on where you go. But fourth year is basically clinical year. So you go out and you go to, if you're in a normal academic setting, like A&M, they do all of their teaching at their teaching hospitals that they have. So they have a small animal teaching hospital, large animal teaching hospital that is staffed with specialists. Incredible environment to learn in. Extremely, typically, your people that are doing the most in the field most of the time are in an academic setting due to the grants for research and things like that. So a lot of very bright minds that you get to be around. There are a couple of, I think they'll consider them externships, but a couple of weeks for a few blocks out of the year, you get to go do kind of whatever you want, whether that's, say I wanted to go do a stockyard internship or whatever the case may be, or a feedlot or whatever the case may be, out in Oklahoma or whatever the case is, right? So they kind of give you a little bit of freedom there. I think that's the typical, academic setting for a fourth year. But at LMU, they didn't have the teaching hospital. They didn't have the large animals. So they did basically where you were given a framework of courses, we'll call them courses, but requirements that you had to fill for the year. And they give you a map of the country, and they said, okay, now here's all the requirements that you have to meet. As long as you require them, we don't care where you go. Right. So I went to Ohio, I went to Tennessee, Florida. I spent 3 months in Texas. Where else did I go?
And this is all part of the course, right?
Fourth year, yeah. This is all very structured, very, you're making sure that you're learning. Yes. Like if a specialty is, or your requirement for that block was specialty, you could pick whatever specialty hospital it was, but you had to be working with a surgeon or an oncologist or an internist or whatever it was, just learning. And it gives you a lot of different perspectives. You get to learn from a lot of different people that practice different levels of medicine. Right. It's a really cool experience. Definitely was.
Do veterinarians specialize in certain areas, or is it general?
You can. You definitely can.
What are some of those specializations?
So I think the specialties is one thing, but the route to get to the specialties is kind of another, I think, important thing to talk about. It's so after vet school, you do your 4 years, you're a doctorate. You can go practice and do whatever you want with that degree, right? So I can go tomorrow and I can say, I'm done doing this. I want to go be a wildlife veterinarian in where you name it state. You have that flexibility. Okay. So the DVM gives you the ability and a lot of freedoms, and then you kind of choose your discipline as a general practitioner, whether that's mixed animal, where you're seeing cattle, pigs, poultry. I mean, they all have their own little subsections. Small animals, obviously, dogs, cats, exotics are birds, turtles, rabbits, all kinds of different stuff. So you have the ability to go and do whatever you want with that. The specialties part is I did not do that. But what you have to do basically is most specialties now, since it's so competitive to get into one of these programs, is you have to go off and do an internship where you're going to rotate through, and it's kind of like a repeat of fourth year, your fourth year clinical year, but you are out in a practice and you're learning from all of these specialists for a solid year. And then that's an internship. Most specialties require an internship prior to a residency, and a residency is when you have decided, okay, I want to do an internship first and rotate through all of the specialties. And I really like surgery, right? So now I want to go off and I want to be a surgeon. And then you go, okay, what programs or what residency programs are out there, whether that's private practice, academic setting, whatever it is, and you apply to the residency program, which, depending on where you go, can be 3 to 4 years, another 3 to 4 years. So, residents and specialists are highly trained in a specific area. So a number of different specialties are surgery, internal medicine, emergency and critical care, oncology, ophthalmology, dentistry. There's more that I'm missing, but those are probably the big ones that you can kind of go into if you really want to get really, really specialized. And that's all that you want to do all day long. Dermatology is another one that just came to mind, but so there's a lot of similarities compared to the human side that veterinarians have the opportunity to go off and specialize in. So it's pretty cool.
How long did it take you to finish veterinary school?
So mine was 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah.
So it was probably a total of 10 years, right? Maybe 9?
Yeah. 9 or 10.
9 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's a haul. It's a grind for sure.
And what year did you finish?
I graduated in 22.
22?
Yeah.
A couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And do you automatically go and get a vet job, or do you have to, do, I don't know if it's clinicals or whatnot to before you start practicing?
The biggest, I would say, we'll call it a barrier, is this little exam called the NAVLE, or the North American Veterinary Licensing Exam. It is a 8-hour exam, and everything that you were taught in vet school is free game. So it is an exam that you take. I took it in November of my 4th year, so prior to graduation, because you have to. I'm relatively positive, and don't quote me on this, but I think you have to pass your NAVLE prior to graduating from veterinary school. I think that is how I was, or how Lincoln Memorial did it, but it is an exam that I studied for about 5 or 6 months during my 4th year. So you're out on clinical rotations, you're learning, you're doing doctor things during the day, whether that's surgery or shadowing or you name it. And then you come home at night, and for another 2 hours, 1 or 2 hours, you're going on one of the programs that is really geared towards passing the NAVLE. That will help you kind of go back and relearn all of the things that you learned during your first year, your second year, your third year that you've probably not forgotten, but you need to freshen up on. So it's even more studying in your 4th year. So it's not like years 1 through 3 are all textbook stuff and academic stuff. During your 4th year, you're still learning in a normal and clinical setting, but then you go home at night and you still have to keep going and studying for an additional 1 to 3 hours a night for the next 4 to 5 months. So it's a commitment, and it's a 12-hour day, no matter what way you commit.
Do you have somebody to lean on to help you out, or are you on your own? Do you have mentors at this time, maybe doctors or anybody to help you out?
Yeah, so how they had it set up was, speaking from a Lincoln Memorial perspective, they had a few different people that would basically, you had requirements for each one of these blocks, and you had to report your physical exam findings, or they made us do projects sometimes. But you have to communicate with people from the veterinary school pretty constantly, and it's all electronic. So you're submitting all of your things through this portal that we had, and they're basically giving you feedback on, hey, here's how you could make your medical records better. Here's, did you notice this? And you're submitting cases to them sometimes, and so there are people that you're communicating with. You're not by yourself by any means, and then the people that are at all of these sites for your 4th year have more or less a liaison that you're talking to directly, that represent that entire kind of site or location. So there's people through the university that you're communicating with, and there's also someone on site there that you're also communicating with. So yeah, you're not by yourself at all.
So what did you feel when you finally graduated? When you finally got that diploma? Did you walk through the stage and they gave you a diploma and all that?
Yeah. So
how did that feel?
That was kind of surreal.
Right, after 9 years, right?
Yeah, and just kind of all the ups and downs, and you're just like, I don't really know what to feel right now, but it does set in. It's probably took me, imposter syndrome. I'm sure you've heard of that in different professions or sports or whatever, and that was something that will stick with you. For me, it was probably the first 6 or 8 months. I was like, I don't even know why these people are showing up to have me help them, because I don't know what the heck I'm doing. So there's definitely some of that. Relief is a lot of it. There's a lot of different emotions. I mean, it's kind of a roller coaster there at the end, but a lot of it is all positive for the most part, for sure.
So what was your you're a doctor now, and what was your first job as a veterinarian?
Yeah, so I worked at a pretty good sized hospital. And
Are you still in Indiana?
no, I'd moved to Pennsylvania at that
Okay.
point to work at this hospital. I have a lot of interest in surgery and orthopedics, so they were a hospital that didn't require you to be a specialist, so you didn't have to go on and do another 4 to 6 years of your life training. They had several doctors there that had been practicing at a very high level and doing, quote unquote specialty work without being a boarded specialist. And they were basically looking for a new set of doctors to come in and kind of start replacing the ones that were going to be retiring, within the next 10, 15 years, whatever it may be. So that's where I ended up. Incredible place. I have nothing but good things to say about it. I learned a ton. It felt like an internship to me just because of the level of medicine that was practiced there.
So how did you end up here in Bryan College Station?
Yeah, so I actually met my girlfriend at where we used to work, and I knew that I'd always had this desire to go back to Texas. I always had it. I didn't know where in Texas. I just wanted to go back. I love everything that it stands for and kind of the persona of the state. And she goes, "Well, I'm going to A&M," and I go, "Well, that's not quite interesting." Right? So then I start searching and saying all these things, and I'm trying to find a practice that's privately held. Not that I have anything against corporate, or there's pros and cons to all of it, right? There always is.
Right.
But I wanted to find a privately held practice, and I have a lot of interest in business. So I grew up in a gauntlet of small business owners. Basically, my mom, my dad, both my aunts, my uncle. A lot of my mom's side is small business. So I kind of always have had that interest. So, I try to scratch that itch as well. Corporate, that's not going to happen. You're out. And that's kind of one of the things that also kind of not deterred me, but just kind of, I was like, I really like this job a lot. I've learned a lot. I like the people here, but I don't want to just do just this forever. I want more, on the business side, exposure to that or opportunities in that realm. And you're just flat out not going to get that from a corporate standpoint. There's a ceiling, and comfort is not a fan of mine for sure. So I kind of I got out of that, I think, without even thinking about it for the most part. It was kind of just a natural thing for me to kind of get away from, I guess, because I don't know, if there's not something that's driving me, pushing me, or that excites me, I guess, and that's where I'm trying to veer off and try to find the next opportunity for the most part. So that's where I found South 40. I'm basically Googling, and I emailed the practice manager, and I was like, "Hey, are you guys looking for another doctor? Here's my experiences. Here's what I like. Here's what I don't." A couple of phone calls, interview, just came down for a working interview, and that's how that kind of all played
Right.
out.
And what's the name of it?
South 40 Veterinary Hospital.
South Veterinary Hospital?
Yeah.
And that's in Bryan or College Station?
It's South College Station.
South College Station?
Yeah.
And, let's get to the fun part.
Yeah, sure.
Tell me about a day in the life of a veterinary doctor.
Yeah, it depends on the day. So I'll walk you through my Monday. Yesterday, you go in about 7:40, 7:45. Surgery Mondays are my surgery day. You go in, you say, okay, these are the scheduled surgeries that I know that I have. You're also responsible for whatever emergencies, if we have time to get to that, as the doctor that's on surgery that day. If not, the other doctors will pick those up throughout the day when it's needed. So you get there, physical exams on all of your patients, communicating with your technicians. It is a team sport. So that's again back to the this is a people business. It's not an animal business at all. That's
a big misconception that a lot of people have, right?
Massive. If that is one thing that I could tell my younger self, it's you better get really good at people really quick, because that's all this is. Yes, the animals are obviously the focal point, but everything else after that is all any other profession or whatever industry. It's all people all the time.
Yeah.
So it's you're communicating with your team. You're making sure that, hey, this is the order that we're going in today. We need to call these owners, let them know we're about to get started, communicating with people. So it's just a constant. It's a little bit of a frenzy in the mornings before you get started, but just kind of deciding whatever order you want to go in and prep and all those things happen. But that's a typical Monday or
What,
surgery.
what type of animals are you working on?
Yeah, just small. Myself personally, just dogs and cats.
Dogs, cats, and what else besides?
That's it.
Okay.
That's all that I do. And then a couple of the other doctors in the clinic will do horses. That's what the guy that Dr. Lee, who owns the clinic, he was just a performance equine veterinarian for 15 years in the community, mobile service, and then he got the wild hair to build a small animal hospital, and that's kind of where South Florida came from. But they do horses as well. So
Okay. Yeah, because here in Texas, I mean, I'm pretty sure that veterinarians, they have to work on cattle and all these farm animals, and aside from that, we still got wildlife. So do you ever want to work on anything besides cats and dogs, or get to that next area or expertise of other animals?
Yeah, I would like to. I think wildlife is one of the things that I would like to do. I'm huge. I love the outdoors, hunting, those types of things. So it's that for me would be something with whether that's elk, deer, mule deer, whatever the case may be, maybe being a part of a research project or something. But that's the beauty of vet med. I mean, you can do. If you can imagine it, you can probably do it in vet med. You can probably be involved in some really cool stuff. But that's for me what I potentially could see myself getting involved in the future. You mentioned the kind of the we'll call it food animal realm, cattle, swine, poultry, those types of things. There are very, very, especially poultry and swine, there are very specific jobs. That'd be almost like, and that's probably all they do. If they're that kind of honed in on it, there's definitely opportunity just to do those species if you want.
And what's the reason for that? Is it because of disease or because it's FDA? All that involved, and
a lot of it I think is focus. Whatever interests you have, whatever excites you, whatever you want to know more about, whatever you like treating. There are, I know I have a couple of friends that are mixed animal veterinarians, and they like doing it all, and that's great. That's that's the beauty of the industry. But there's definitely a opportunity to go and just solely do swine or solely do cattle, whatever industry or subset or species that you want to work on. A lot of it's really, and then you'd mentioned kind of the regulatory side a lot, and then you have to play by those rules, for outbreaks, especially on the large animal side for outbreaks and vaccine protocols. It's very, very heavy on those types of things. But small animal is kind of what I've gravitated towards, and that's where I see myself staying for at least the foreseeable future.
What's the most surprising thing that you've seen so far in your career? As far as maybe outbreaks, like you mentioned, or anything like that.
Yeah, I think that really not from a medicine standpoint, really, but just like like we were talking about the day in the life of a veterinarian. It is what is required to communicate well with people is probably the biggest thing that I've been like, wow, I did not expect this. And that's again back to how we need to rewire people that want to be veterinarians. It's not, like I said, this is not an animal situation. You're trained, your mind is trained to do that. Your mind is not trained to talk to people.
Because sometimes these pets don't make it, right?
Yeah, oh yeah. That's
then something that you have to deal with as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's one of those things where that's such an interesting dynamic, really, is in your own mind is, recently, Saturday, Sunday, for example, we had one that we had performed surgery on, and there was nothing we could do, basically. And, you deal with people that are extremely emotional, upset, and you are ultimately responsible for that, whether or not, they're dealt a poor hand with that case specifically, but that's how it is a lot of the time. But what I tell people and try to drive home is, in vet medicine, we have the ability to perform euthanasia to end suffering, those types of things, and it is a very backwards way of thinking about it, but it's most of the time it is a gift to that animal, and that's something that I had to kind of retrain my mind to understand, is that they are in a horrible place. If a human was in this place, I would not want to see a human being like that, nor do I want to see an animal like that. So it's you're ending life, but you're also ending suffering and pain, discomfort, emotional strain on humans, their owners. So it's a whole nother. It's just a different way of thinking about it for sure. But that's definitely another side of it that it's hard to detach yourself from it. You always hear doctors or surgeons or people that have extremely high stress jobs that you cannot get emotionally bound. There has to be a wall, because if there's not, then it's extremely, you can, like I said, you can spiral yourself out of control emotionally, and if you get too attached, and that kind of seems counterintuitive. I care, I really do. As soon as someone brings their animal to me, I want to solve their problems. That's my job, right? And I'm going to do everything that I can, but I also cannot become so emotionally invested that it's going to wreck my day if things don't go my way. And that may sound harsh or abrasive, but you have to kind of have a protective mechanism. Right. You're going to give it your all, no doubt.
Have you developed that I guess that wall of I guess the feeling of hey, it's okay, or
Yeah, I think
in the short time that you've been doing this.
Yeah, I think you don't at first. You definitely don't. You take it home with you, no doubt, when things don't go your way. But I think, again, as long as you are able to understand that, from a science perspective, from a medicine perspective, from, I look at this dog or cat's blood work and I'm like, look, there's no fixing this. There's no way. It goes against the rules of science and physics and all these other things. And that in your own head, that you have to be very gentle with people, because they don't understand that. You're trained to know that, but they are not. Right. So you have to kind of put it in layman's terms and say, look, you've done everything that you can do. Right. At this point, the best thing, unfortunately, for him or her, or whatever the case may be, is that, do we give them the gift of euthanasia? And then that's tough to tell people. It's never a good conversation. I hate the conversation every time, but it's one that's important. It's probably the most important thing that we do as veterinarians is in suffering, right? And we keep them as healthy as we can for as long as we can, and when that day comes, then you're also there to kind of help people and help them kind of deal with that part of it too. So
right. What's the weirdest animal that you've seen come in, whether it's here or anywhere else?
I worked at but during my fourth year, I was at an exotics clinic, or a small animal clinic, but they did a lot of exotics there. So we dealt with just a myriad of different things, birds and rabbits and turtles and all kinds of stuff. And I had never, been exposed to that. Right. That's an area of vet medicine that's in extremely high demand, because no one really. It's not that no one wants to do it. I just don't think that anyone really has. I don't think there's been enough research or enough clients that have those types of animals that really want that high level of care. It's out there. It's definitely out there, because I've seen it and I've witnessed it firsthand. But it's one of those things where it's just like, it's nothing that I've ever been exposed to, and I don't know. It's
right.
You're taught all the medicine things in school, but it's just a whole different dynamic.
Right. What are your goals? What are your future goals? Do you want to one day own your own practice, or do something different?
Yeah.
As far as not different from veterinary, but do like you said, exotic animals or wildlife.
Yeah, I think that I would love to be able to find a partnership somewhere. Hopefully it's here. That would be my main driver for sure, to try to find something like that. Like I said, business is just interesting to me. Right. I'm really not a materialistic type of person or someone that, money drives everything, but I think it's just an interesting dynamic that you get to mold and kind of drive a culture and drive and build a practice that people enjoy going to and they have positive experiences at, and they, your people that work there, your technicians, your management, everything, they enjoy what they're doing. They know what the vision is. That more for me, more so is why I'm interested in that. I think more so than any sort of financial gain. Will it be there? Sure, of course, but I think that the other everything else is what really interests me about that. And then as far as what I do, I do a lot of I try to do a lot of orthopedic surgery. I've taken a lot of continuing education, so that's another aspect, is that it never stops. You will never know everything. That is another thing that I quickly realized when I graduated, is that you do really well, you have a great GPA, you go out, and then you get your first 10 emergency cases, and you're like, wow, I know absolutely nothing. Right. And you have to lean on people that have been doing it for 20 years or whatever.
Not only that, but new technology and new medicine and all that. So continuing education is a big part of being a doctor.
Yeah, we just took one out in Park City, Utah, for an advanced knee surgery course. So it's constant. It never stops. And if you do stop, then it's one of those things where I think it's accepted as a profession that you can't stop ever, because then you kind of lose the fire to be better, and you lose all of those things. So I think it's a lifelong learning experience. It's not a 4-year, 10-year, whatever it is. I mean, that's what you're doing for the rest of your life when you sign up for that.
Do you still enjoy it?
Oh yeah.
As far as the educational part?
Oh yeah. Oh, I mean, especially your experiences are going to mold kind of the way that you practice and what you've seen. Mm-hmm. But then you go off, and I do this course with a couple of boarded surgeons. That's all they do is orthopedic surgery. Right. And they're saying, oh, well, when you look at this x-ray this specific way, you need to make sure that your alignment's good. And here's a different technique for approach. And here's how you should use that drill instead of this way. And it's just like, oh, I would have never thought about that. Right. Short of, if you would have just told me that, I would have never thought about that. And that's the beautiful thing about it, is you will never know everything. That's... Right. And that's intimidating and stressful for a lot of people. But I think as long as you're able to continue to work towards, whatever it is that you're very interested in, whether it's surgery or medicine or ER or whatever it is, mm-hmm. and you constantly are trying to sharpen the knife of your knowledge, that's definitely something that definitely drives a lot of the profession, for sure.
All right. Well, Dr. Gonzales, I don't keep you too long here. Anything you want to add to the podcast?
I think for those out there that have interest in veterinary medicine, it's one of those things that it's an amazing profession. I will tell you that much. It takes a lot of work to get there. If you need advice, if you need a word of encouragement, if you need honesty, someone that'll tell you what it's really like, I'm more than happy to talk to these people and go to high schools or whatever the case may be, and help however I can help. But if you have that want and that desire, it's going to be a long and it's going to be a hard road, but you can do it. There's no doubt about that, and you can. You just have to put your head down, and it's just like with anything else. And a lot of I think our culture and our community is they're not higher educated. They just aren't. Those just facts, right? So something that I would tell them is, you can be the one. You can go out, you can break the mold, and you're going to hear a lot of noise. You're going to be people telling you that's foolish, you shouldn't go do that, this, that, and the other, that maybe are not educated, and they think that that's not the correct way of doing things, and maybe they're right. But if that's what you want, you can go out and you can be that one, and you can be the example within your family, within your community. Then say, go out and do it, man. It's like I said, it's not easy, but it's something that's very doable. So yeah, if you have that desire, if you have that want, go chase it. No one's going to do it for you, unfortunately. Right. So, yeah. So
what's your favorite movie involving an animal?
My favorite movie involving an animal.
With the animal. Dr. Doolittle, maybe?
I don't even know. It's been so long. I'm not a huge movie person. Right. Let's see.
Yeah, we're big movie buffs, so we always ask that question. What's your favorite movie?
Yeah. I don't know. My favorite movie of all time is probably like Lone Survivor or something like that.
Oh, okay.
I like those type of
action movies.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Gonzales, I appreciate you coming on the podcast, and it was a pleasure meeting you, and it was a great story, and I hope some of these kids get motivated.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you guys need to ask a question to Dr. Gonzales and get some advice, you can reach me or you can reach him at what's the name of the place again?
South 40
Veterinary Clinic.
Yes.
Yeah. And once again, I'd like to remind everybody to please subscribe to the Desde Cero con Manuel and keep the channel going. And Dr. Gonzales, would you want to send some shout-outs to anybody?
Just the veterinary community as a whole. All of those that are out there that want to be a part of this community. It's not something that's very common or flashy or anything like that, but it's an extremely rewarding profession. So, like I said, I encourage anybody who has that thought to go chase it.
All right. Well, thank you for being on the podcast again, and thank y'all for joining us. And we see you guys next time. And thank y'all.